This is Chris, Idaho painter here on Paint Live TV. Today I'm going to be talking about how to set up an airless sprayer. So this is going to be, geared towards someone that's never operated an airless sprayer. So I'm just going to, walk you through the components on an airless sprayer, how to get this thing rolling and spraying. Now, all airless sprayers, they're almost all identical. There's the only difference is maybe like an on-off switches on one side versus the other side. Prime valve, could be in a different spot, but they're all pretty much similar. So here's a typical, small airless sprayer right here. Now, I'll walk you through. We got every airless sprayer is typically going to have an on-off switch. It has an on-off switch right here, turns it on. You're typically going to have a pressure gauge right here, and this is going to set the pressure on your pump. So you can turn it all the way up, to full pressure, anything in between, and then it's going to have a clean setting, typically where you would set it to, the clean cycle. Another component on an airless sprayer is typically the prime valve and spray valve. This one, the way it operates, you flip it forward and it sprays. It's going to spray paint. You flip it to the other side and it's going to prime. Now, an airless sprayer is a sprayer that sprays only paint out of it. It isn't mixed with air. The pump itself completely sends through the hose 100% paint. And in order for that process to happen, it has to prime and purge all of the air out of the machine, out of the pump itself, and that's what the prime setting is for, is you set it to prime to purge all the air out. When the air's all out, then the thing can actually spray. This one identifies it. It shows a pattern on here, a little gun that it's in the spray mode. Over here, it has kind of a little circular pattern. That means it's circulating paint, that it's in the prime mode. We've got a hose and a gun attached to it right there. You have two tubes typically on every single airless sprayer. You have what we call an intake tube. This is actually gonna take the paint up through your gallon can or your 5-gallon bucket right here. It's gonna take it up. It typically has a rock guard on it right here. This protects and keeps any rocks, any type of debris, large debris going up inside this tube itself. This is your prime tube. This is the tube when you set this thing to prime, product is actually going to come out of here, either water or paint. It's going to come out of this end. This is what is actually cycling. It's pulling paint up through here. It's sending it out through your prime tube, and that's purging all the air out of the system itself. So I'd stick this thing into my water or my paint. I'd stick this into my water or my paint or a secondary bucket, turn it to prime, turn it on, prime it until you don't see any air bubbles coming out, flip it to spray, and then it's ready to go. You got intake tube, you got prime tube right there. That is the basics of an airless sprayer. You typically have a filter. Every single time you use an airless sprayer, you should be filtering your paint right here. This is a manifold filter right here. They're typically hand tight. You should be able to take them off by hand, unscrew that. Now you can see here's your filter right here. This should be cleaned every single time you use the airless sprayer. There's a manifold filter, and then there's a gun filter. There's a gun filter inside the gun right here, and you're gonna clean the manifold filter and the gun filter out every single time you use it. We're gonna show you how to start it. All the sprayers that are electric, they do have battery operated sprayers now. This is an electric sprayer. You're just gonna plug it in when you're ready to use it. Before plugging it in, make sure it's in the off position. Make sure it's, because you don't want it to be in the on position. Turn it on, and then it actually send, if you had water or paint or something in this, and this wasn't, in your bucket, it could send, product, dirty water, whatever, wherever it's going. So before you plug it in, turn it to off. I'm gonna be cleaning it first, making sure it's got, clean water in it before I actually cycle any paint through it. So I never take and put it right into paint immediately. I always run fresh water through it, clean out the pump protector that's in it, get it all primed, ready to go, and then I'll stick it into my paint. So I have intake tube in the water, I've got prime tube in the water, and my gun I always set in the water too. I want to take my gun, put my gun on safe so I don't do any accidental trigger pulls. I'm going to make sure it's off, plug it in. I'm going to set my pressure all the way down. I'm gonna turn it to prime. So I got it on prime because I'm gonna run and purge all the air out. I'm gonna turn my pressure up. I'm gonna go up just a little bit, somewhere around 1,000 PSI. I'm gonna turn it on. It's gonna kick on here in a minute. It's gonna start running product through. You can see the pump protector. It's coming out. No air bubbles are coming out now. I could just dip it in my water. I don't see any air bubbles coming out. I'm gonna flip it to spray. Now it's gonna begin building pressure. Then once it begins building pressure, you're gonna take and set it to whatever pressure you're going to be spraying with. I can turn it back down, hold on to my prime tube, release the pressure. Now it'll build back up to the lower pressure. I'll show you, I'm gonna set my paint. I'm gonna be using a gallon. Just gotta do some touch-ups on a building right here. I'm gonna take my gallon, set it inside of a 5, so it's more stable, less likely, to spill or dump over. You can actually pull out of a single gallon, or you can pull out of a 5. Now, when I'm not using my airless sprayer, I wanna take my gun trigger, put it on safe. I always take the gun, the tip of the gun, I want that in water. I don't want my gun submerged in water. I just want the tip in water. One of the reasons why I use an extension. It's in there. If I'm not gonna be using it for any period of time, you wanna take and just turn it to the off position, and then you also want to release the pressure on the pump. This is your prime tube. You don't ever want to release the pressure on this prime tube because there's a lot of pressure behind this thing. If you're running it like 2,500 PSI, there's 2,500 PSI, pounds per square inch, in this machine that's going to release out this tube. But if you hit this thing to prime with all that pressure in there, this tube's gonna come flying out, could hit you in the face, it could shoot paint everywhere. Take this prime tube, hold on to it, point it down into your water or your paint, stick it to prime, and it releases all your pressure. All the pressure is released. I'm gonna stick it back to spray because I'll be spraying here pretty soon. So I've loading my airless sprayer up with paint. I've just put my intake tube into my paint. You could take your prime tube and put it down into the paint also. I typically always put my prime tube in a separate bucket of water. That's the way I like to do. Loaded it up with fresh, clean water. It was already primed with water, so all I had to do is stick my intake tube into my paint. I didn't have to reprime it. Now I'm just gonna run all the water out of it. As soon as you see paint coming out of it, now paint just started to come out of it, I'm gonna go into my paint. Now I'm gonna start cycling the paint through the hose and just make sure there's no air bubbles in it. So now there's no air bubbles in it. I'm ready to spray. Make sure when you put your tip and guard on, gun's on safe. Don't put your hand anywhere in front of it. Everything's ready to go.